Welcome to the Great British Baking Show. No, not really. Just as well, too, because I really don't need Paul and Prue here judging my every move and then judging my cake. In any case, what I'm going to try to do is bake an orange pound cake. And contrary to what I'm told, I'm not going to use a pound of eggs, a pound of butter, a pound of flour, and a pound of sugar. That would be insane. Besides, I've never done this before, so I wouldn't want to waste all those ingredients. But we'll see how it goes. So let me start by putting on the customary apron. Here we go. Can't bake properly without one of these, right? So while I'm doing this, I'll tell anybody who's interested that this is going to be a small orange pound cake, and it has some very simple ingredients. Just one medium-sized orange, 3 large eggs, about 3/4 of a cup of sugar, just regular granulated sugar. And by the way, if you're going to try this, don't use brown sugar or any odd varieties of sugar. Just go with regular white granulated sugar. I'm going to use about 1.25 cups of flour, 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder, about 2/3 of a cup of melted butter, and we're going to bake it at 350 for about 40 minutes and see what we get. So let me start with the orange, which I'm going to zest, because I think the orange zest is what's really going to make this taste amazingly good. So we'll start with that, and we'll just do a little orange zest here, and later on when we're mixing all the ingredients, this will go in with it. It's fascinating how this works. As I mentioned, I've never done this before. But Lynn and I have been watching the Great British Baking Show, and although I'm never going to come anywhere close to any of those people in terms of my baking skills, you have to start somewhere. So this is where I've chosen to start. And at the end, we'll see whether or not we have something edible. You know, again, this is something that I just decided to do off the cuff, so although I have a good sense of the proportions of the ingredients, I've never even zested an orange, so I really have no idea how much of this I should be doing. But we're just going to see how it goes. It's funny because when you watch the baking show, one of the things they're constantly talking about is what a workout this is on the arms. I gotta tell you, I'm feeling it already. Alright, I think we've got a decent amount of orange zest here. So let's set that aside, and now I think I am going to juice my orange. This is also something that I've really not done before, but it's okay. There's a first time for everything. Or, as Spock tells Lieutenant Savick in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, for everything there is a first time, Lieutenant. So what we're looking for here is about 1/4 cup of orange juice. And I'm already thinking that when I pour this, I'm going to pour it through a coffee filter or a paper towel so that all the little seeds and doodads don't end up in my cake. Although, I have to imagine the orange pulp might be something that makes the juice that much better for baking this kind of tasty orange pound cake. But, you know what? Live and learn. Maybe next time I won't pour it through a filter. We shall see. All right, moving on to the other half. Like I said, this is definitely a workout. But it's a tasty one. So I've got a good amount of orange juice now. So let me leave the frame for a moment, but I'm going to keep talking because I do have to locate a coffee filter or some such thing. As I said, I don't want to just pour all this schmutz. And no coffee filters to be found, So we'll just try a paper towel. Let's see what we get. All right, a lot of the juice is staying behind in the paper towel, but we'll just sift a little bit here and see if that helps get it going. Yeah, I think that's working. Seems okay. All right. Well, I think we have a significant amount of extra squeezing that we're going to have to do. Let's see. Yeah, I think we need a little bit more. And at this point, I accidentally let some of the stuff from the paper towel fall into the measuring cup anyway. So let's just live dangerously. Yeah, that looks like just about a quarter cup. All right, so I've got my orange zest. I've got my fresh squeezed orange juice. Now, I'm going to preheat my oven to 350 degrees. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to grease a 10-inch loaf tin. And there are a couple different ways you could do this. I understand you could use shortening or butter. I'm going to use butter. By the way, the butter I'm using is room temperature, so it's a little bit easier to just get it all over the inside of the tin, including the corners. That's important. I don't want anything to stick. And I'm going to sound like I know what I'm talking about when I say this next bit, but I have to assure you I don't. But I think I might just put a little flour in this greased tin, shake it about, and then pour off the excess. And I think the combination of the room temperature butter and the flour will give me a nice non-stick surface into which I can pour my pound cake batter. So we're just greasing this liberally. And I mentioned this is room temperature butter. Actually, all my ingredients are room temperature. Again, I don't know if I know what I'm talking about, but it just seems like that might help prevent things from curdling, and it might allow them to all combine a little bit better. So I've had my eggs sitting out at room temperature for a little while. I've already melted the butter, and I've let that cool. So we shall see whether or not I'm onto anything with that idea. But I've now got a liberally greased loaf tin. So let's set that butter aside. And let's pour in a little flour. And that sound of paws on the kitchen floor was my dog Guinness, who's coming to investigate what it is I'm up to in here. I'm sure she's hoping I'm going to drop something so that she can eat it. All right, so a little flour in the loaf tin. And like I said, I'm just going to pour off the excess. Shake it around a little bit. Oh, that's nice. There's a nice buttery, floury coating on the inside of the tin. I think we're going to be okay. Just really make sure it gets on the bottom and on all four sides, into the corners. I'm sure I'll show this video to Lynn at some point, and she will tell me whether or not I'm doing the right thing or wasting my time. But there we go. I think that should do nicely. Now, one thing I want to make sure of is that I don't have any excess flour sitting in the loaf tin, because I can just imagine that turning into ugly, non-edible clumps. And we really don't want that in my first attempt to bake a nice orange pound cake. So, the tin has been greased and coated with flour. And we've got the oven preheating. It's about halfway there. So, let me just clean my work surface a little bit while I'm waiting. All right. So I think at this point, the next thing I'm going to want to do is crack my eggs into a large bowl and whisk them with my sugar. And I mentioned the eggs are room temperature, so let's get them cracked. That's 2 and 3. And what we'll do now is we will pour in our 3/4 cup of sugar. And I'm going to whisk this. Now, I don't think you need to use a mixer. I think you can get away with just whisking until this batter is sort of pale and fluffy. In fact, I think a mixer would be overkill. But what do I know? We shall see. So I'm just going to slowly start pouring in the sugar while I'm whisking the eggs. And again, what I'm shooting for here is a pale and fluffy batter. And by the way, this is not a dough. This is a batter. What's going to make it rise, at least my understanding of what will make it rise, is the baking powder and the natural chemical properties of the sugar and the eggs. So since it's not a dough, it doesn't have to prove. There's no yeast involved here. Alright, so just keep whisking. Got my sugar almost all the way in. And again, what I'm aiming for here is a nice fluffy batter. And because I have no experience with this, I really don't know how long it will take. But let's find out. I'm just going to keep gently whisking and watch for that sort of pale fluffiness. Now, I want to be careful. I don't want to overmix this. If I overmix it, it's probably going to end up heavier than I want. I really want this to be light and fluffy. So I'll just keep whisking a little bit more. It is a little tough on the arms, so I think I'll switch to my left arm. And that's not going so well, so we'll go back to the right. All right, that's looking kind of fluffy. Alright, so that being done, now I want to sift in my flour and my baking powder, and I want to stir that well. So I don't have a sifter, but I'm just going to use a small strainer. And again, I really don't know what I'm doing, so I'm going to do this a little bit at a time and stir. Ooh, that's looking interesting. Okay, I don't want any clumps if I can help it. So let me get some more of that flour sifted into there. Okay, so far so good. And we'll keep stirring. Guinness, your paws are making an awful lot of noise on the floor. I hope that doesn't ruin the soundtrack of my cake baking video. Okay, I'm trying to get this nice and stirred up so there's no clumps of flour. If I were on the Great British Bake Off, I would hate to have Paul pick up my cake and say, "Oh, there's clumps of flour in here." That would not be good. Okay, this is looking really nice. Let's get the last of the flour in there. Okay, so, oh, my oven's preheated. Yippee! Oh, I don't need to whisk that. I need to stir it. Silly me. And again, just making sure that nothing is lumpy or clumpy. We wouldn't want a claggy, stodgy cake batter. That actually looks really good, if I do say so. Now, I don't want to make a rookie mistake and forget the baking powder. I did mention that we were going to use 3/4 of a teaspoon. Unfortunately, my measuring spoon, the label is worn off. I think that's a teaspoon, so I'm going to put 3/4 of that in there and hope for the best. And again, let's stir. Get that stirred in there nicely. Okay. Now, we have our room temperature melted butter. We have our orange juice right here. And we've got our zest. So now I want to mix those in. And I'm just going to keep stirring as I'm mixing it all in. Okay, that's the butter in. I hope I haven't made this batter too thick. It was fluffy before, but it's thickening up a lot now. So hopefully the butter and the orange juice will help it to thin out to the right consistency. Let's get that orange juice in. Okay. Looking pretty good. What do you think, Chris Collins Baking Show viewers? How does that look? I think it looks not half bad. Now, we don't want to forget the zest. So let's get that in there. And hopefully this is going to have a nice orangey taste to it. We'll keep stirring that in. Looking real good, if I do say so. Sorry that I keep standing up and going out of the camera frame, but this is hard on the back and the arms when you're an old man like me. Now, I feel like this is could go either way, but I'm going to cheat a little bit and add one extra secret ingredient. Just a little bit of cinnamon, just a dash, not too much, just to give it that little bit of extra something that they would probably call punch on the Great British Baking Show. So it might look like I was pouring in a lot, but really only a tiny bit. We're just going to stir that around. And how's that batter looking? I think it looks pretty good. So let's get it into the loaf tin. Fingers crossed. Now I could prepare an orange glaze for this cake, because my understanding is that pound cakes, especially those baked by beginners like me, can end up being a little bit dry. But I really don't know how to make an orange glaze rather, and I'm going to try this out the way it is. Look, if it doesn't come out well, it can go right in the bin, and we'll just do it again another time. Right in the bin, yeah. Okay. My batter is in the loaf tin. I'm just evening it out. I don't know if that's something I should be doing, but when you suffer from mild OCD, it's probably something that you are likely to do. Alrighty. The batter is pretty evenly distributed inside the loaf tin. I am smoothing its top so that if it rises, it will get a nice sort of dome. And I'm actually going to pick up the camera and let's have a look at this. I don't know. What do you think? I think it looks okay. So let's put it in the oven. Here goes nothing. That's going to be 40 minutes at 350. And I'll probably check it at 35 or 36 minutes. And if I put a toothpick in the center and it comes out clean, I'm going to imagine it's done. So we'll come back and check then. All right, it's the moment of truth. Not the moment of proof, the moment of truth. Again, there's no proving in baking a pound cake. So I'm going to set the camera down right where I had it before. And let's see what comes out of the oven. Here goes nothing. There she is. Now I'm going to put a toothpick into the center. Oh, she's clean. I think it's done. We'll check back after it cools. All right, everybody, she is done. So now comes the real moment of truth. Let's see what we got. There it is. Let's cut into it and see if it's any good. Sure looks like a pound cake. I see little bits of orange zest in there. All right, here we go. Not half bad. Maybe a little dry, but nothing some butter couldn't solve. I think it's a success. All right, it's Chris. Thanks for watching. Adios.